This project is going to be covering implicit bias in our community. And then the following images are just some images I found to help me with implicit bias. Alright, and then this quote by Kathleen Oster from 2019 just says, "As leaders for equity, we have to examine, unpack, and mitigate our own biases and dismantle the policies and structures that hold equity in place." Basically, this quote is just the perfect quote to put in the beginning of this experiment because it sort of encompasses what we're going to be going over just with the inequalities presented by implicit bias and sort of the different effects that can have on people without anyone actually realizing that they may be giving advantage to one race over another. And then that leads into the problem, but before we can actually understand this problem, we need to know what implicit bias actually means. And it's basically just when someone has an attitude towards a group of people or a certain person without their conscious knowledge of them having that attitude. And then implicit biases can cause a great deal of inequalities around this country to this day without people even understanding what truly is going on because, again, you don't have that conscious knowledge that you're actually favoring a group of people towards another. So that's really dangerous, sort of what we're trying to expose with this experiment and get the word out a little bit better. The Harvard Implicit Association test that we all completed a few weeks ago in class really opened my eyes up to these problems. That's what I want to base my experiment around. Simply completing this test, however, does not create the change people need. It doesn't spread that awareness that I'm looking for in this. And in order to try and actually make a difference, we have to spread the knowledge. We have to sort of explain to people what implicit bias means, which we will cover at the very end of this experiment. And then moving on, this is the actual experiment. So the experiment itself is just in order to try and expand on just simply taking an implicit bias test, I am going to invite a group of people in for an interview session. In this session, I will first ask the question, "Are you familiar with the term implicit bias?" After this, I will have each person take the Harvard implicit bias test. And then following this, I will ask a series of questions ranging from what were your biggest takeaways from this test to did this test make any impact on yourself? And then I will then explain the true term, implicit bias, and how it can lead to inequality in our society. Even if the interviewees have no bias in the test, I want to try and show a deeper understanding of implicit bias for them to carry with them. The main argument is that this test can help people comprehend implicit bias. Question 1, which is, have you heard the term implicit bias before this?
I understood the concept, but I wasn't sure what the formal term was called.
That brings us to question 2, which is, can you describe the test?
I answered questions about if I preferred one race over the other and had to sort pictures and words in the right category.
Question 3 was, what did the results show?
My results showed that I did not prefer one race over the other.
And then the final question is, would you recommend this test and why?
Yes, because it made me think about how society influences people on a daily basis, and growing up, these influences can lead to unconscious biases. This test is not perfect, but it helps look for those biases.
And then wrapping things up here, after the interview, I was able to understand the effects of the test on someone who had no prior knowledge of implicit bias. After interviewing the student, I did notice that this is an effective way of educating people on implicit biases in our society. This is an important topic because implicit bias suggests that people can act on the basis of prejudice and stereotypes without intending to do so. And then that is from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which will be listed in the references.